I was looking at the stack of research we have for today, and it feels a bit like we're looking at three different people, maybe four.
It really does feel that way. It's almost disjointed, isn't it?
I mean, looking at the biography here, on one page, you got a guy hanging out in 1960s Paris, smoking cigarettes, wearing the trench coat, talking philosophy with Michel Foucault.
Oh, yeah.
Very chic, very intellectual, the kind of guy you'd be intimidated to talk to at a party.
The absolute epitome of the French cool kid, the enfant terrible.
Right. But then you flip the page, and the same guy is living in a jungle in Panama, sleeping in a hammock, eating insects, and completely cut off from the Western world for 4 years.
For 4 years.
And apparently, he liked that version of his life better.
Much better by his own admission.
Yeah. And then just to confuse things further, you have the third guy, the Nobel Prize winner, the immortal of the French Academy, the guy giving lectures in Stockholm in a tuxedo. It's hard to reconcile that these are all the same person. J.M.G. Le Clézio.
It is hard, and that's what makes him such a nightmare to categorize for critics, but an absolute dream for us to study.
Exactly.
The Swedish Academy, the folks who gave him the Nobel, they had this line in their citation that I just love. I think it frames everything we're going to talk about today.
What was it?
They called him an explorer of a humanity beyond and below the reigning civilization.
Wow. Beyond and below. That is heavy.
It gives you chills, doesn't it? It implies that the world we live in, the skyscrapers, the stock markets, the podcasts, the elections, that's just the surface.
Yeah.
That is the reigning civilization. But Le Clézio spent his life trying to pry up the floorboards to see what was underneath.
So that is the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just doing a standard biography. We are trying to figure out how you go from being an experimental French hipster, this intellectual darling,
Right.
to becoming a voice for indigenous tribes and the environment. And honestly, I want to understand the sensual ecstasy thing the Nobel Committee talked about, because it sounds promising.
It's a fascinating concept, and to get there, we have to look at everything. We've got his books, his interviews, and some truly wild stories about his childhood that explain why he never quite felt at home in Europe.
Okay, so where do we start? The beginning seems obvious, but with him, even that is complicated. Let's start with the passports, because the confusion starts right at birth.
It really does. So JMG, Le Clézio Jean-Marie Gustave, was born on April 13th, 1940. Now, context is everything here. He's born in Nice, France.
A French Riviera. Beautiful.
Beautiful, but not in 1940. This is World War II. France is under occupation. It's a time of shortages, fear, and chaos.
Not exactly a vacation spot.
No. But while he is physically born in France, his heritage is already pulling him in completely different directions.
Because his father wasn't even there.
No, not at all. His father was a surgeon in the British Army. So at the very moment Le Clézio was taking his first breath in Nice, his father was stationed in Nigeria.
So right from day one, there is this massive separation. The father figure represents authority, the British Empire, and this distant, exotic land of Africa. And the mother is there in war-torn France.
It's this perfect split, and it gets even more complicated.
But then there is the Mauritian connection. This is the part of the notes I had to read twice. He has 3 nationalities, French, British, and Mauritian. And he calls Mauritius his little fatherland. But he barely lived there.
He never lived there for more than a few months at a time, and that paradox is the key to his soul, I think. To understand why he claims Mauritius so strongly, we have to go back in time. We have to go back to the 18th century.
Ah, the ancestor story.
The ancestor story. This is family legend, but it's foundational. His ancestor, a man named François Alexis Le Clézio, was living in Brittany, France during the French Revolution.
Okay, so heads are rolling, the guillotine is busy. A pretty tense time to be alive.
Exactly. The Revolutionary Army, the Jacobins, they are demanding total loyalty. And they demand that François enlist in the army. But they have a requirement, a very specific requirement. He has to cut his hair.
A haircut.
The revolutionary cut, short hair. It was a symbol of breaking away from the old aristocratic styles, the wigs, the long hair of the ancient regime.
And he refused.
You refused.
I have to stop you there. He fled the country. He became an exile because he didn't want a haircut. That seems a little dramatic, doesn't it? I mean, hair grows back.
It sounds incredibly petty to us now, sure. But think about the context. In a totalitarian environment, which the terror effectively was, the body is the last thing you own.
Ah, okay.
If the state can tell you how to wear your hair, they own you. His refusal wasn't just vanity. It was a profound act of political defiance. He basically said, my body is my own. And he got on a boat with his family to escape.
That is a serious commitment to personal liberty. Where was he treated to go?
He intended to go to India. That was the plan. But the boat stopped in Mauritius, which is this island in the Indian Ocean. And for whatever reason, maybe they were tired of the sea, maybe they liked the look of the place, they got off, and they stayed.
And that accident of history, getting off the boat one stop early, created this weird hybrid identity for the Le Clézio family. Because Mauritius isn't exactly French, right?
Well, it was a French colony, but shortly after they arrived, the British took it over during the Napoleonic Wars. But here is the loophole that created Le Clézio's world. The British, in the Surrender Treaty, allowed the French settlers to keep their language, their religion, and their customs.
So you have a time capsule.
Precisely. You have this community of white French settlers, the Franco-Mauritians, living on a British-ruled island off the coast of Africa, speaking 18th century French and holding on to customs that were disappearing back in Europe.
It's like a cultural bubble.
A bubble, exactly. And so Le Clézio grows up hearing these stories. Even though he's in France, his parents talk about this island like it's the Garden of Eden. It's this lost paradise.
So he grows up feeling like an exile. He feels that his real home isn't the concrete and rain of Europe. It's this mythical island he's never even really seen. He calls it his little fatherland. It's a place of memory, not geography.
And that's a theme that just runs through his entire life's work. The search for a home that maybe doesn't even exist on a map.
That sense of being an outsider must have been amplified by his childhood. We mentioned the war. But after the war, something huge happens.
This is the event that made him a writer. I truly believe that. In 1948, when he is 8 years old, he, his mother, and his brother get on a ship. They're finally going to join his father in Nigeria.
Imagine that for an 8-year-old boy. You've grown up in a small village in the mountains behind Nice-Roquebillière. You've seen war, sure, but your world is still very small. And suddenly you're on a boat for weeks, heading to West Africa.
It was a massive cultural shock. He wrote about this extensively later in his life, particularly in his book, L'African, The African. He describes the journey as passing through a looking glass.
Through a looking glass, I like that.
He leaves the gray, contained, sort of rationed world of post-war Europe and enters a world of intense light, heat, storms, and just vastness.
And he's meeting his father, essentially, for the first time. He would have been, what, an infant when his father left?
Right. He hadn't seen his father since he was a baby. So in his head, his father is this hero, this distant god, this myth. But the reality was a bit different.
The notes say his father was strict.
Strict, to put it mildly. His father was a British army surgeon who had spent years in the bush alone. He was rigid. He was colonial. He was authoritarian.
So not a warm and fuzzy reunion.
Not at all. He believed in discipline. So Le Clézio goes from this free-roaming life with his mother to suddenly having this stern man measuring out his food and telling him how to behave. It was a shock.
That dynamic is fascinating. You have the freedom of the African landscape, the jungle, the insects, the sheer vitality of Nigeria clashing with the rigidity of the father figure inside the house.
That tension is the engine of his creativity. It's right there. The conflict between nature freedom and civilization rules. In Nigeria, the boy Le Clézio found a kind of freedom outside the house that he never had in France.
What did you do?
He played with the local children. He ran through the tall grass. He describes this incredible feeling of being part of something bigger. He realized that the world was much bigger and stranger than what he learned in school.
It seems like that trip planted the seeds for his lifelong fascination with cultures outside of Europe.
Yeah.
He didn't just see Africa as a scary place or a place to be conquered. He saw it as a place that was alive.
He saw it as a place that had its own logic, its own magic. And significantly, he realized that the European way of doing things, his father's way, wasn't the only way.
Right.
It was just one option, and maybe not even the best one. That's a huge realization for a kid to have.
So he spends this formative time in Nigeria, absorbs all these sights and sounds, but eventually he has to come back. He has to grow up, go to university, become a serious person.
And he tries. He really does. Which brings us to his meteoric rise as the young rebel.
Okay, so this is his Paris phase.
This is the Paris phase. He goes to university in Bristol for a year, then in Nice. He studies literature. He's incredibly smart, obviously.
He gets a master's degree. I saw the thesis topic. Henri Michaud. and the mystical experience.
Which is perfect, right? Michaud was a poet who used drugs and travel to explore the boundaries of the mind. So Le Clézio is already signaling what he cares about. He cares about the things that break the rules of normal reality.
He's not writing his thesis on, Proust or something predictable.
No, he's already looking for the weird stuff, the edges.
And then, in 1963, at the ripe old age of 23, he drops his debut novel, Le Procès-Verbal. In English, The Interrogation.
And boom, instant superstar.
23 years old. I was still figuring out how to pay my electric bill at 23. He publishes a novel and almost wins the Prix Goncourt, which is like the Pulitzer and the Booker Prize rolled into one for the French.
He won the Prix Renaudot, which is huge, and the book was the talk of Paris. Everyone was talking about this brilliant, strange, young writer.
But let's pause here, because I think we need to explain what kind of book this was. I've tried to read some of the cool French literature from the 60s, the Nouveau Roman stuff, and I have to be honest, it can be rough. It's not exactly a beach read.
No, definitely not a beach read. If you bring the interrogation to the beach, you're going to have a bad time. You'll probably just stare at the sun and question your own existence.
Which is kind of what the main character does, right? What was he actually doing in these books? Because the notes mention he was obsessed with insanity and language.
So think about the time period. This is the 1960s. Structuralism is huge. Existentialism is still hanging around. The cool intellectual stance was to deconstruct everything.
Deconstruct everything, okay.
The idea was that traditional storytelling, once upon a time a hero fell in love and defeated the villain, was a lie. It was a fake structure we imposed on a chaotic world to make ourselves feel safe.
So they wanted to write the world as it actually was, without the neat little plots.
Right, and they believe the world is chaotic, fragmented, and doesn't have a clear plot. So Le Clézio's early books are trying to capture that chaos. In The Interrogation, the main character, Adam Paulo, is a guy living in an abandoned house. He might be a deserter from the army. He might be an escapee from a mental asylum. We never really find out.
So what does he do? What's the story?
He wanders around. He stares at objects. He tries to kill rats. He follows a dog. He sits in the sun and tries to figure out if he actually exists or if he's merging with the landscape. It's very internal.
It sounds intense.
It is intense. It's written with this high-voltage, nervous energy. He's describing the sunlight on a wall for 3 pages, but he makes it feel like a hallucination. It's a book about a mind falling apart, or maybe a mind waking up to a different kind of reality.
And the heavy hitters loved it. The big-name philosophers.
Oh, they adored it. Michel Foucault, the philosopher who wrote Madness and Civilization, basically said, "This guy gets it." Gilles Deleuze praised him. Le Clézio became the poster child for this very cerebral, very difficult, very French way of writing.
He was the rebel. He was questioning the nature of language. He was questioning reality.
He was the angry young man in the black turtleneck. He fit the part perfectly.
But he didn't stay there.
Yeah.
And I think that is the plot twist of his life. He could have stayed in Paris, accepted the awards, become a professor at the Sorbonne, and just kept writing these difficult books about madness.
He could have had a very comfortable career doing that.
But he didn't. He left.
He ran away, essentially. He realized that the intellectual life in Paris was its own kind of trap. It was just words about words about words. He wanted something real. He wanted to get his hands dirty.
So he starts moving. He goes to the U.S. to teach. But then, 1967, Thailand. This seems like a key moment.
All right, this was his national service. In France, you have to do military service, but you could do cooperation instead, basically aid work. So he gets sent to Thailand.
And he gets kicked out almost immediately.
Laughs. He does. And the reason is so telling. It says everything about the man he was becoming.
Why? What happened?
He didn't get kicked out for being a bad worker or for being lazy. He got kicked out for protesting against child prostitution.
Wow. Okay. That is a bold move for a young man in a foreign country on a government assignment.
It is, but it shows that his moral compass was already pointing towards social justice. He wasn't just there to be a tourist or an observer. He saw exploitation, specifically the exploitation of children, and he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He wrote articles, he complained, and the authorities said, "Okay, you're too much trouble, get out."
So even back then, he was defending the humanity below the reigning civilization.
That's it, exactly. He was already doing it long before the Nobel Committee gave him the award for it.
So they boot him from Thailand. Where do they send him?
They transfer him to Mexico to finish his service. And this accident of bureaucracy being sent from Thailand to Mexico changed his life and arguably the course of French literature.
Because this is what leads to Panama.
This is what leads to Panama.
And honestly, this is the part of the story that blows my mind. We are talking about the Emberwunen tribe.
Yes. So while he's based in Mexico, he starts traveling down into Panama, and he ends up spending 4 years from 1970 to 1974 living with the Emberwunen people in the Darien jungle.
Okay, we have to talk about what living with means here. Because usually when a writer goes to a remote location, they stay in a hotel, maybe hire a guide, take some notes, and go home to write. Maybe they stay for a month.
This was not that. Le Clézio disappeared. This wasn't a retreat. This was immersion. The Embra lives in the deep rainforest. At that time, there were no roads, no electricity, no running water. The social structure was completely different. It was a river-based culture. He lived in their villages, ate their food, slept in a hammock.
What drove him to do that? Was he running away from his fame in Paris?
I think he was running towards something. You know, he had spent all those years in Paris writing about how civilization is a trap and language is a prison, but it was all theoretical.
Right, he was writing it from a cafe.
He was writing about madness from a comfortable apartment. In Panama, he wanted to see if there was another way to be human. He wanted to see if he could exist outside of the Western machine. He was testing his own theories in the most extreme way possible.
And what did he find? What did 4 years in the jungle do to a Parisian intellectual?
He found silence. That's the biggest thing he talks about in interviews. Yeah. In the West, we are constantly bombarded with noise words, ads, media, traffic. The Embra culture was based on a different kind of communication, a connection to the immediate environment, paying attention.
I found this quote in the research where he talks about how living there stripped away his intellectual armor.
That's the key. You can't be a pretentious French philosopher when you have to worry about jaguars, or finding clean water, or navigating a river in a dugout canoe.
Your master's thesis doesn't help you there.
Not at all. The jungle demands that you be present. It forces a kind of humility. He said later that he arrived there thinking he knew things. He was the educated European, and left realizing he knew nothing.
There's a story about him getting sick, right?
Yes, he felt very ill at one point. He had a scorpion sting, I believe, and got a terrible fever. And the tribe cared for him. They used their traditional medicine, their knowledge of plants, and that experience of vulnerability of being completely dependent on these people who had none of the technology of the West, but had a profound knowledge of healing and care that shifted his worldview.
He stopped seeing them as primitive.
And started seeing them as perhaps more advanced in the ways that actually matter.
And this is where the sensual ecstasy comes in, right? The Nobel Committee's phrase, it's not sexual. It's sensory.
Exactly. It's the ecstasy of the senses. Feeling the rain on your skin, smelling the rot and the bloom of the jungle, watching the light change on the river. He stopped trying to analyze the world and started trying to feel it. He got out of his head and into his body.
And he didn't just sit there and feel things. He actually did work. He translated their mythology.
He did, and this is important. He didn't just romanticize them. He treated their culture with the same academic rigor he would have treated Greek or Roman culture. He translated Le Prophétie de Chilam Balam. He wrote a doctoral thesis on the history of Mexico. But he wasn't writing about the conquerors. He was writing about the conquered. He was looking at history from the losing side.
So he comes out of the jungle in 1974. He's married now to Jemia, who is Moroccan. He's got kids. And obviously, he can't write the same way he did before. You can't write jagged, experimental novels about insanity after you've lived that kind of life.
You really can't. The old tools don't work anymore. And that leads us to his literary metamorphosis. In the late 70s, he pivots completely.
What changed in the writing itself? If I picked up a book from 1965 and a book from 1980, would I know they were by the same guy?
You might doubt it. The jagged, nervous, almost paranoid energy of his early work disappears. In its place comes this long, flowing lyrical style. It's smoother, it's almost hypnotic.
And the subjects change too.
Completely. He stops writing about urban alienation and starts writing about the desert, the sea, the sky, childhood, travel, and this deep connection to the environment.
And the book that really marked this change, the one everyone points to, is Désert, published in 1980.
Désert is a masterpiece. It won the Grand Prix Paul Morand from the Académie Française. It's the book that proved he wasn't just a 60s flash in the pan. He was a major, major writer with something new to say.
Tell us the story. What happens in Désert?
It has 2 timelines, which is brilliant. One is set in the present day, the late 70s, following a young girl named Lala. She's a descendant of the Blue Men, the Tuareg nomads of the Sahara.
The Blue Man.
Yeah, from the indigo dye they used. So she lives in a shanty town on the edge of a Moroccan city. She's poor, she's marginalized, but she has this incredible, fierce connection to nature. She talks to the insects, she stares at the sea, she has this inner freedom.
And the other timeline.
The other timeline goes back to 1909 and 1910. It tells the story of the Tuareg tribes, her ancestors, fleeing across the desert to escape the French colonial army.
So again, he's taking the perspective of the displaced. He is writing about the people running away from the civilization that Le Clézio himself technically belongs to.
Exactly. And the way he writes about the desert is stunning. He describes it not as a wasteland, not as something empty, but as a place of purity, of blinding light, of freedom. The free men of the desert possess nothing, but they have the horizon.
So what happens to Lala?
She eventually goes to France, she ends up in Marseille, and she works as a model, actually, but she hates it. She sees the city as a cold, dead place full of slaves to money and image. It's a prison compared to the desert.
It sounds like he's taking all that anger from his youth, the anger at society, and channeling it through this girl. But instead of just screaming, he's showing us the beauty of the alternative.
That's a perfect way to put it. He's not just critiquing the West anymore. He's offering an alternative vision of beauty. He's saying, look at what we destroyed. Look at the dignity of these people we called savages.
And clearly it worked. The audience responded. This wasn't just for philosophers in Paris anymore.
Not at all. This new style brought him a huge mainstream audience. By the 90s, he was a titan. In 1994, Lyr magazine did a survey, and 13% of readers voted him the greatest living French writer.
13%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number in a poll like that.
It's massive.
Yeah.
He was being translated into 30 languages. He had become the voice of the ailleurs, the elsewhere.
Of elsewhere. I like that. So he's established, he's beloved, he's living this global life. Albuquerque, Mauritius, nice. He's found his rhythm. And then the biggest phone call of a writer's life comes in.
2008, the Nobel Prize in Literature.
It had been a while for the French, hadn't it? A long time between wins.
A long drought. The last French language winner was Claude Simon in 1985. So this is a huge moment, a kind of homecoming for the prize.
And we talked about the citation earlier, explorer of a humanity beyond and below.
Yeah.
But they also called him the author of New Departures. What do you think they meant by that?
I think they were acknowledging that shift we just talked about. They recognized that he was brave enough to reinvent himself. Most writers find a style that works, and they stick to it forever. Le Clézio broke his own mold because his life experience demanded it. He had the courage to depart from his own success.
How did he handle the win? Was he gracious?
Yeah.
Did he seem overwhelmed?
He was very Le Clézio about it. He said he was touched, but he immediately deflected the glory to his mixed heritage. He said, I was born of a mix, like many people currently in Europe. He used the moment to validate the idea of being a mongrel, of not belonging to just one nation. He made it about everyone, not just about him.
That's very consistent with his character.
Completely.
And then came the lecture. The Nobel lecture is always a big moment. You have the world's attention. What are you going to say?
He titled it Dans la forêt des paradoxes, in the forest of paradoxes, which is a great title.
And what was the message? What paradox was he focused on?
He used the platform to attack information poverty.
Information poverty. That sounds like a tech term. Like he's complaining about slow broadband speeds.
But it does sound like that, but he meant it culturally. He was talking about who gets to be heard, whose stories get told. He pointed out that the vast majority of human beings in Africa, in the Amazon, in the slums of Asia, do not have access to books, and more importantly, their own stories aren't being published. Their myths, their poems, their histories are oral, and they're disappearing.
So he's saying that literature with a capital L is an exclusive club.
Exactly. He's saying it's a luxury club for the West. And by ignoring the stories of the rest of the world, we are impoverishing ourselves. We are missing out on 90% of the human experience. It was a very humanist plea. He wasn't talking about great art. He was talking about basic human dignity and the right to have your story heard.
It's consistent with the guy who got kicked out of Thailand for protesting. He never lost that advocacy. He never became just an artist in an ivory tower.
He didn't. And it kept engaging globally. Even after the Nobel, he didn't just retire to a villa in Nice. He went to South Korea to teach at Ewha Women's University. He went to China to teach at Nanjing University.
I love the image of this guy. You picture a Nobel laureate, you maybe picture him in a dusty library in Paris. But Le Clézio is moving between Seoul, Nanjing, Albuquerque, and Nice. He is constantly teaching, learning, moving.
He's a shark. If he stops moving, he dies. Or at least his creativity dies. He needs that friction of new cultures, new languages to spark his writing. He thrives on being a foreigner.
Now, we have to address that with a figure this complex. It's not always smooth sailing. We can't paint him as a saint. Even a Nobel Peace Prize adjacent figure like him can step into controversy.
Yes, and we need to discuss the Mama Rosa situation in 2014. This gives us a glimpse into how his worldview can sometimes clash with a very messy reality.
This one is tricky. Let's lay out the facts first. Who was Mama Rosa?
Mama Rosa was the founder and director of a shelter in Mexico called La Gran Familia. She was a legendary figure. For decades, she took in street children, orphans, kids nobody else wanted. She was seen as a savior, a living saint by many.
But then came the raid.
July 2014, Mexican federal police raid the shelter, and what they find is horrific. The report said there were insects in the food, children were malnourished, some were being held against their will, preventing parents from picking them up. It was described as a house of horrors in the media.
A really grim situation, and Le Clézio stepped in.
He did. He wrote an opinion piece in Le Monde, the biggest newspaper in France, and he defended her vehemently. He argued that she was close to sanctity.
That is a risky stance when the police are parading evidence of abuse on the nightly news. Why did he do that? Was he ignoring the evidence?
It's complicated. I don't think he was ignoring it, but I think he was viewing it through a very specific lens, his lens. He knew Mama Rosa. He had visited the shelter. He likely saw a woman who was doing the dirty work that the Mexican state had refused to do for decades.
So he saw the state, the reigning civilization, attacking a woman who was caring for the humanity below.
That's it, exactly. From his point of view, he probably thought, how dare the government, which leaves these kids on the street, come in and judge the one woman trying to feed them, however imperfectly. He saw it as a colonial-style intervention, authority versus the grassroots.
But if the allegations were true, he was defending an abuser.
And that's the conflict. His loyalty to the outsider and his distrust of authority maybe blinded him to the reality that sometimes the outsider can be abusive too. It highlights that his philosophy siding with the marginalized isn't always neat and tidy. It can be messy. It shows the limits of that worldview sometimes.
It reminds us that he's driven by emotion and personal connection, not necessarily by cold, hard facts. His loyalty is to the people on the ground.
Right. He is a poet, not a judge. And that loyalty can sometimes lead him into complex moral territory.
But if we zoom out from that specific incident, his advocacy has been pretty consistent on the big themes, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Throughout his life, he has focused on ecological concerns, long before it was trendy. Books like Terra Amata and The Giants from way back in the 60s and 70s were about urban pollution and environmental destruction.
The displacement of people.
Constantly. Wandering Stars about a young Jewish girl fleeing the Nazis, and then an Arab girl displaced by the creation of Israel. Onitsha is about the legacy of colonialism. And of course, indigenous voices, as we saw with his translations. He has consistently used his platform to shine a light on the things reigning civilization wants to ignore.
So, as we wrap this up, let's go to the synthesis. We have called him the man of elsewhere. It really seems to fit.
I think that's the only title that does fit. Look at the arc. He starts with an ancestor fleeing the French Revolution because he won't cut his hair. He's the boy on the boat to Nigeria, seeing a new world. He's the protester in Thailand. He's the tribe member in Panama. And finally, the Nobel laureate in Sweden. It's a life defined by movement and crossing borders.
He really is a bridge. He connects the reigning civilization, Europe, the West, the academy, with the humanity below, the indigenous, the marginalized, the forgotten.
And he doesn't just connect them. He suggests that the value, the truth, and the beauty are often found on the side of the humanity below. He argues that they have something to teach us.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave with everyone. Le Clézio started his career writing about insanity in the West. He was obsessed with madness, alienation, the breakdown of the self in the modern city. He ended up writing about sensual ecstasy in the global South and the indigenous world. It was a complete reversal.
It really was, from torment to a kind of grace.
So the question is this: does Le Clézio's journey suggest that for him, sanity and peace are impossible within the structures of modern Western civilization? Does he believe that to be truly whole, to be sane, you have to escape the skyscrapers and the rules and go back to the desert?
I think he might argue that. Or at least he argues that we need to let the desert into our skyscrapers. We need to remember that we are part of nature, not masters of it. We need that other perspective to keep ourselves sane.
It's a question he leaves for us to answer. And I suppose the best way to do that is to pick up his books. If you want to find out for yourself, pick up Désert or read The African. It might just change the way you see your own little fatherland.
Indeed. It's worth the trip.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening and keep exploring.
Until next time.